it would be nice, like in addition to having a focus motor attached, like as if almost like some element that allows you to remotely operate this. I think this is something that then the autofocus could become more interesting even for sets that have a focus puller.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Nino and Johnnie Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 36 of CineD Focus Check. Hi, Johnnie.
Hello, Nino. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Well, quite. I think both of us don't have much sleep lately. I mean, we are really literally busy doing one review after another. That's how it feels. I mean, and you know what? The more we do, more comes.
Yeah,
That's
it
how
never ends. Well, we're
lucky.
We'll back to our regular programming in a way. We'll talk about some of the news of the week, actually the last 2 weeks. And then also we'll actually start with the two reviews we've already mentioned before, because as we were working about them, one is about the BLAZAR APEX autofocus anamorphic lenses, which you reviewed, this pre-production version, and I did the DJI Air 3S. And after that, we'll move on to talk about our GH7 lab test, which a lot of people have been waiting for. So finally, the lab test is out, dynamic range, rolling shutter results, and exposure latitude. Very interesting. Then Canon just released 4 new RF lenses at the end of this year, which are quite interesting because they are kind of like, a lot of focal lengths that people have been waiting for, I think. Then we'll mention the SIRUI Aurora series, which was just announced as well, starting with one lens. Then we'll talk about a nice update from DJI for the Osmo Action 5, which might or might not have to do something with Gunther's review that he did.
I want to believe it was.
It was. Yeah, so they made something better. And then last but not least, we'll mention also the Insta360's new action camera, the Ace Pro 2. But let's start off with the reviews. Do you want to start? Should I start?
Maybe I'll start.
Yeah?
You know what?
Go for it.
I mean, you say ladies first, dogs before. Then I'll be the first today. So, where are we?
Well, you reviewed we mentioned this before. You reviewed the BLAZAR APEX on a Sony event, the Sony Kando Alps event, which was perfect because those are E-mount lenses, right?
That's right. So first of all, we have 2 anamorphic autofocus lenses, 35 and 50 millimeter, and those will come first in E-mount. Other mounts will see the light of day later, hopefully early next year. But what I want to say first of all, and I can see also based on some of the comments, that we are becoming spoiled. It's really those lenses, at least the 50 millimeter, will be sold for $799, and we are talking about autofocus anamorphic lens. It's 133, but what BLAZAR did, they tried to give it kind of aesthetic wise the look of a 1.5 squeeze anamorphic lens. Personally, I was really impressed with what they did. They did really well. Those lenses are very easy to work with, and even if those are pre-production models, the autofocus performed very well.
We're looking at some of the shots here in case you see the video versions of this, of Johnny's review.
Yeah, I really invite the people to watch this because it's just to give a feeling of how those lenses perform. And by the way, when I'm sitting in the studio and talking about the lens, that was also, I decided to put the lens. Nobody was behind the camera. I used the Sony A9. It doesn't have any picture profiles, but still just a standard picture profile. It looks quite good.
You mean for the
camera, for the Sony A9?
Yeah.
That's right. So you will see that it doesn't breathe at all. It's, of course, you need a good camera like the A9 in order to talk to the lens, but it performed really well. So I would say that 95% of the time that I shot outdoor, the autofocus held quite good. And of course, BLAZAR is still working to tweak the mechanical aspect of the lenses, because there's small things that needs to be adjusted.
So you said they are actually claiming that this looks more like a 1.5x
That's right. And those are T1.8 lenses. And maybe part of the look is, of course, because those are relatively fast. I have to say that if you are working completely like wide open on T1.8, don't expect the lens to be, or both lenses to be sharp, edge to edge. It's safe to say that it really starts to be much more visible from T2.8, and on T4 you are completely safe. But that's happening with many lenses out there.
But it's the corner sharpness.
Yeah, I'm talking about the corner sharpness. The middle will always be sharp. And actually, it's funny because sometimes I do complain about lenses being kind of over sharp. But here it didn't feel like it felt like a nice sharp. I mean, the aesthetic is. They look
nice. Very sharp. I mean, they look much sharper than the BLAZAR Remus, which I like, which are really 1.5 times squeeze. I mean, I have to say, I don't think it looks like 1.5 times squeeze at all.
It depends on which. I think it's really. Depends.
I mean, just comparing with a Remus, because the anamorphic effect is much more pronounced on those. But they look great. I mean, they look very sharp, and I think you have a very nice out of focus bokeh, which looks anamorphic, but I see a clear difference. I mean, to the Remus, of course, because it's just simply less of the effect, but to the advantage of sharpness. I think it looks sharper. It looks like a sharper lens in general.
No, it's nice. I mean, it's an APS-C lens. You have to remember, we're getting a lot of comments asking about full frame anamorphic autofocus lens, and we don't have any info from BLAZAR that anytime soon they are working on anything like this.
And it looks actually as if, sorry to interrupt, but it looks like when I'm looking at the footage, the barrel distortion is very controlled. It doesn't look like, because usually, I mean, with a Remus, if there's one thing, it's really the lines are kind of like, like almost becoming circular in a way on the corners, which is a nice, I mean, it's an effect, but as soon as you shoot anything technical or anything architecture-wise, I mean, here it's quite straight, even in the corners, which is nice.
That's one of the things that still you can see on the right-hand side here. I mean, that's one of the things that needs to be 100% adjusted, and it's not there yet. We're talking about the distortion on the side.
Yeah, but it's it's very controlled. I see. I know on your test chart, it actually looks more extreme, but in real life, it's not something that interrupts me at all.
Yeah, but in any case, BLAZAR always doing barrel distortion, not a pincushion, and I, in a way, prefer this a little bit more. So I think I really had a good time to work with those lenses, and we can't share for now the time when they will be available. This is still not 100% set. The 50mm will come to the market first, and the 35mm after. When it comes to flares, please be aware that this lens is very relaxed with flares. I mean, I even sometimes it takes extra effort to flare it. That's my findings. It has a natural flare. That means whatever light you are projecting into this, it will take it. If it's daylight or tungsten.
So this bluish tint is simply because of the light you used from the phone.
That's right. But again, you saw. I don't know if you showed this again. It's very minimalistic in a way, which I like. It's not like a blue.
Yeah,
like in your face.
But it's also like on the Remus, it's like it's very controlled actually, compared to the SIRUI Anamorphics, for example.
Yeah, I like it very much like this. And one thing is for people to remember, because when you're working on normal spherical lenses and you want to give, let's say, a film look, usually you cut the top and bottom of the image with, or you just add black bars, which of course you throw information. So here, the main thing is that for a 16:9 sensor, 133 is perfect. It's really a good match together, and you're using the whole sensor without sacrificing and throwing away any information. And I can also predict that many photographers will finally jump on the anamorphic wagon now when you have an autofocus lens. I think it will work for them quite well. It will be very easy for them to adapt. They don't have to, because so many of them moved forward and already working only in autofocus and not manual focus anymore. So I think that will give them the ability to shoot images that looks a little bit different when you shoot with spherical lenses.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that it's both. It's not just an autofocus lens; it's also a manual lens. You can switch back and forth, and you can use it manually too, which is important, I think.
Yeah,
because
of course.
Otherwise you're really stuck.
Course.
Yeah, like if it was like a photo lens, and like you have an endlessly turning barrel, it's a problem. Yeah.
But that's also leading to one of my criticism, which is not a harsh one in any way, but the autofocus clutch, the switch, the AF mode is to the back, and we are so used to have the autofocus mode to front. Any lens that I recently touched, it was always front autofocus.
Really? I never even think about this.
Yeah, but it's only when you start to work, you kind of feel like, okay. But good things are, for example, the reading. You have it in meters and imperials on both sides. That's really nice. Some lenses that we know simply don't come like this. And yeah, I mean, it was really easy to work with them. And if you're a Sony user, I think you will also appreciate the nice color here, because at the end, this kind of orange color is the same as the Sony the bayonet itself. Yeah, so it's matching very nice.
Very nice. Yeah, so you would buy them?
I would not, in all honesty, I would not even hesitate. If I want to work on small productions and I want to kind of come up with a different look, and think about your customers right now. It's not that your customers are always thinking about, this is 133 anamorphic or 1.5, or I'm not talking big budget movies. If you want to shoot something which looks a bit more creative, a little bit different than the ordinary, I would definitely use those.
But would you choose them over the one? Let's say you have those, so 133x autofocus lenses and the 1.5 times manual focus Remus. Would you choose those over the others?
Depending on the work I do. If I do documentary work, and I know that this documentary work will involve a lot of run and gun, I will definitely use those ones. This is so much hassle-free. I mean, if you've been working a little bit with anamorphic lenses and you need to focus those, you know that it can be, as a one-man band, it can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah, especially when you escort somebody or you want to, and here it was literally very easy. And as you can see, also I used them a bit in the rain. There was no issue whatsoever, really. I mean, very nice. BLAZAR in general, what they do, they really try to give, I think, good value for the money.
Absolutely.
And I think they did quite well here.
Great. How would you compare them? I mean, from the anamorphic look, you also worked in the past a lot with the 133x SIRUI lenses. In terms of look,
I like those much better. But nothing to do now with SIRUI. I just want to say that more companies will surprise us very, very soon with more offerings like autofocus lenses, anamorphic lenses will come to the market. Yeah, I'm saying this because it's nice to see how the market is growing. I really wonder which company will be next to introduce the autofocus anamorphic lenses. But this is definitely, I mean, BLAZAR was the first one to announce it, but it's not necessarily that they will be the first one to be in the market with such lenses. And I'm just saying this is a new niche in a way. And like with what we can see now, what's happening in lenses in general, also this niche of autofocus anamorphic lenses will grow rapidly. And I expect the competition to be fierce.
I just think in general, it's amazing that we finally see really cinema lenses that have an autofocus option coming to market slowly. And this is something I think that a lot of people are still like, if you're like in a traditional cinema setting, do I need this? And I think as people, it's one of those things when you start using it, you will realize how much you need this. And I'm actually working on a video on the Sigma lens as well, the Sigma autofocus pre-production lens, which they, at least at IBC, they weren't even sure if they want to produce it. And it's just amazing to have this capability in a fully cinema lens to just switch on the autofocus. The question for me is really, I think for if you work in a more traditional setup where you have a camera assistant that is pulling focus, it would be nice to have this option to switch on and off the autofocus remotely. Because imagine having this ability on your remote follow focus, and let's say you do a tracking shot walking somebody towards the camera, which is traditional, like it's one of the hardest things to pull focus on, right? If you're on a T1.8, for example, wide open on a long telephoto lens or whatever, very, very hard to track, even for a very good focus puller. Imagine this person could just switch on remotely the autofocus of the lens and switch it off as soon as he wants to manually control the position of the focus again. That would be amazing.
But how do you see this happening technically? I mean, this is a clutch. This is a physical button.
That's what I'm saying. That's right now it's not possible. I'm just saying it would be nice, like in addition to having a focus motor attached, like as if almost like some element that allows you to remotely operate this. I think this is something that then the autofocus could become more interesting even for sets that have a focus puller. But because right now, of course, it's one or the other. It's either you work alone and you use it as an autofocus, because on a day where you're shooting with autofocus, you will not probably use a follow focus, even alone, right? It's either the one or the other. But I think the both can be combined, and I think there's a future for that. I mean, we see it with other innovations like focus bug and all those things, and the kinematic, and that there is a market for some kind of focus. I call it focus assist in professional sets where you have an assistant. But I think if this is almost like building all that technology inside the lens, but you need to be able to remotely control it too. So yeah.
Good. I just want to say last word is about the camera that I used. I used the Sony FX30, which is really an underrated camera, always in the shadow of the FX3. This is a, $1,780-90 for a very capable camera, APS-C one. I used it. I don't want to go too deep into this. The only thing that you have to remember in case that you are working with the FX30 and any of those autofocus anamorphic lenses, remember that when you want to try to decrease the image in the camera, like the viewing, of course it's not recording decrease, but just for viewing purposes, you will have to compromise, and then you're losing the IBIS, the stabilization system, and you're losing the autofocus capability. So you literally have to not use this feature of decreasing. You have to decrease the image in your brain.
I guess they just didn't think about that there will ever be autofocus anamorphic lenses when they
but what about the IBIS?
Strange.
I mean, it's a bit strange. Yeah, I mean, it's a pity. I really hope that Sony will consider a way to update this and also include other decrease factors, because right now it's only 133 and 2.
But they should just simply not be connected. You should be, like enabling the anamorphic decrease should not disable other stuff. So
I think it has something to do with, I don't know if you remember, but in other cameras like the Fujifilm and the Panasonic cameras, there is a separate menu for the IBIS working on anamorphic. You literally have to tell the camera the focal length that you're working in anamorphic. So I guess that's somehow being correlated. And
yeah, because it works. I mean, on the when I shot with the S5 II on the BLAZAR Remus, I always had the sensor stabilization on.
Yeah, but you also have to go to the menu and set it to the camera needs to know that you're with an anamorphic lens in order to give the best results here. And there is a separate menu for that. The thing is that I would not even complain, I'm going with chunk here, if that would have been the cinema line. And the FX30 is under the cinema line. And I think as being under the cinema line, it deserves a bit more attention when it comes to anamorphic, especially now when it becomes really affordable. Yeah,
I guess you should just write a separate opinion article asking Sony to do this. Then they will hopefully listen.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. On the subject of interviews, how do we get captivating stories? How do we keep our subjects engaged? Let's talk about the questions we ask and how we ask them. There's a time and a place for straightforward questions, especially if you want succinct answers in your edit. But if you want to weave a story with your subject, start to focus on emotions and how they tie to events or memories rather than just people and places. We could simply ask, where are you from, to get a city or a country from someone, but we could also ask, what was your first memory as a child? Or, do you remember the time that you moved out of the home that you grew up in, and how did that make you feel? Instead of asking, where do you work, you could ask, tell me about a time you felt proud about something you did at your workplace. Notice that when questions like these run through your mind, you tend to reflect on your own experiences and want to share more about yourself than just the facts. Ask the questions that get your own mind turning, and you are sure to have a more engaging interview. 1 minute tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Let's move on to the other review we published this week. It's actually about the DJI Air 3S that I already also mentioned on the prior podcast.
I admire that you even remember the names of those drones. We talked about this before, but this is so confusing. If you're not 100% into this, it all sounds the same.
As part of the review, I spent actually 5 minutes or 3 minutes talking about those different names of the drones and what they mean. But it's difficult. I mean, we had an Air 3, so we have the DJI Air 3, which came out like 1.5 years ago. We have a very nice review that Jacob made about this drone, very much in detail, and it's essentially kind of it's an upgraded version of that drone, with the difference being that now we still have 2 focal lengths, which an equivalent of 24mm and 70mm, but the main 24mm is now a 1-inch sensor, which makes it much more light sensitive. Why is this important in the lineup of DJI? Well, and actually I didn't realize this before, but basically most of I call them foldable drones now. They used to be all called Mavic. Now only the top model is called Mavic, confusingly, for the last couple of years. But anyway, so all the foldable drones that almost look the same, right? They always just different size of the same concept. They all use, except for the Mavic 3 Pro, up until the Air 3S, all of the others used almost the same sensor for the main camera, which is strange, right? If you look at it, because the Air 3 had the same sensor and the same focal length as the Mini. The Mini 3 and the Mini 4 Pro, they all had the same. So even if you spend more money, you essentially didn't have a more light sensitive sensor, because you had the same size, and even though you had the second focal length, you basically had the same image quality. But
do you know about the processor? Because in order to reach a certain degree or quality of image, it's not only the sensor, you need the processor behind it. But I don't think there was a big difference. I mean, you were able to change the sharpening, the post sharpening in some of those drones, and some not, which is strange. For example, on the Mini 4 Pro, I think they introduced this via firmware update that you could do this. But even on the Air 3, I don't think there was we never did to be fair, we never did a side-by-side. But I don't think there was a big difference in the footage. And it's simply because of this tiny sensor that it had, it's simply not good in low light. Now, low light drone, of course, it's not like a low light camera. You don't need a low light drone very often. However, especially when you're flying in sunset or sunrise and you have a lot of contrast and you have a lot of shadows in the foreground and so on, then is when it's starting to fall apart. How is the image quality? Because eventually what really counts is the image quality, and you have a lot of experience.
The image quality,
impressed or not so impressed?
I think it's great I didn't do a lot of low light flying. I did a little bit of it in the woods, and I think it looks great. However, there seems to be a limitation with the data compression rate? And the data rate, which is something that we've seen also, and we could talk about this in a minute, with the Osmo Action 5, where Gunther did a full review of the action camera, and while it's a great action camera, he realized that for some reason the compression is higher than on the Action 4, which of course results in compression artifacts and stuff like that. So, with drone footage, it's a little bit more difficult because you generally don't have, as with a normal camera. With normal camera, you have a lot of kind of different types of shots. You know what I mean? It's like you have close-ups and you have fast-moving stuff. With a drone, even if you're flying really fast, you don't have as much changing in the image because of the perspective and the distance to objects. So even if the compression is higher, it's not immediately apparent. However, rightfully, some people commented on my review that we should test this because it's definitely something where you see the differences.
On trees, or where do you see this mostly?
Yeah, exactly. If you're like flying closely to trees with a lot of leaves and stuff like that, and then you have this compression smearing that starts to occur. However, I have to say, since we've moved to H.265 compression, it's a lot better than it used to be with H.264. I mean, if you think back to the older Mavic Pro and Mavic Pro 2, where, I mean, the Mavic Pro 2, for example, still amazing image. I mean, to this day, the image from this drone looks amazing. It looks very cinematic because it doesn't have this over-sharpened look of the original Mavic, and also some of the models that came after that, which is funny. And but in general, this compression smearing is something that is less apparent than it used to be with H.265, but it seems to be limited to around 100, maybe 130 megabits per second in 4K. Now, this camera shoots up to 4K. Again, I can show some of the clips here that when I was flying with it, I flew on a very pretty day. Let me just find the right position here. I flew on a very pretty day, and you simply don't see any compression. This was shot in D-Log M, and a very light color correction applied, just a very straight LUT actually, to bring it back to normal. Of course, you don't. I mean, even if you look at this in full quality, you don't really see a lot of artifacts at all, and it will start to occur in like lower light areas during sunset time. Yeah, but still, I mean, it's funny because you have these big jumps in the DJI lineup, because after this, there's nothing up until the Mavic 3 Pro, which costs almost 3 times as much, even in the version without the SSD. And of course, that drone has 3 cameras. It has a Micro Four Thirds sensor, where this is a 1-inch sensor, and it can record ProRes in the SSD version. So, but that version costs $5,000. So it's almost like 5 times as expensive. And
it's not that the image is 5 times better.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, but you have ProRes, right? So you have almost no visible compression artifacts whatsoever. And that's really my standard drone for everything. And like the flight behavior is very similar. It's a little bit bigger, which means that like you will have to think about things like like and braking and wind resistance. You feel a little bit of a difference. Although this, I have to say, I mean, DJI is not a company that usually, how should I say, kind of limits the quality of their lower end drones. So if they have a new technology and they announce a new drone, it will be in the drone. And in this case, it's the LiDAR, which the big one doesn't even have. I mean, that's a first. Why is this important? I mean, we already have a lot of visual vision sensors around the drone in omnidirectional obstacle sensing. I mean, that's something that is now even in the Mini 4 Pro, which is something we didn't even have in the Mini, right? I mean, we now have it on almost every one of the new drones has omnidirectional sensing. However, it's optical, which means that if you have very fine leaves or very, very fine branches of a tree, especially now it's fall, it's more difficult for the drone to recognize just a branch which doesn't have any leaves on it. And it can happen that you just fly into a branch. Now with a LiDAR, now it's only front facing to begin with. I mean, that one changed, but the LiDAR is essentially emitting lasers to the front, and it doesn't need any light. I mean, this is like, it sees something invisible in a way. It sees the obstacle by just sending lasers out, and then just, that will see anything in front of it, which also enables a new feature that is, well, in general, better obstacle avoidance. So you can now literally, you can set it to tracking mode and walk through the forest, and it will just follow you, and it will avoid anything that comes in its way, which is pretty great. Or if you like downhill mountain biking, and you're not operating it with your remote, you could literally just put the remote in your bag and just have it follow you and be fairly sure that it will not crash. Fairly sure. I would still not recommend to do this, but it's something that a lot of people have been doing, and there's other videos on the internet which you can see. And there's also a new feature which is called Smart Return to Home. And this is different from the normal return to home in a sense that it actually calculates a route avoiding any obstacles, because the existing return to home would not do this. It would basically just fly at a certain height back to your starting position, and it usually takes photos of the ground, and then it just identifies that ground and it just goes down. And sometimes it was a little bit off if the GPS is not exact and so on. And this is more secure, of course. And that's the thing. I mean, if you're getting started with a DJI drone, like flying drones in general, the latest generation will always have the best safety features. And it doesn't matter, like you would think that the entry-level drone, that like the cheapest one has the most, should have the most safety features, but in reality, it's always the latest one. And for a very long time, we had the original Mini had no obstacle avoidance, or just the frontal ones, I think, which was actually, ironically, it made it harder to fly than the others, because you didn't have any side avoidance. So this is something where there's a lot of innovation in here. I can see that this LiDAR thing will probably be omnidirectional in a couple of years. I guess with the next drone, they might be also in the back, and then it will be on the sides. I don't know. Has happened with the normal cameras, the obstacle avoidance cameras as well.
My curiosity is actually a bit different, because you said that the drone has 3 cameras?
2. This one has 2.
This one has 2. When are we going to see this stabilizing system being implemented in the futuristic Osmo Pocket? Because currently the Osmo Pocket 3 has 1 camera. Yeah. And if they could take 2 or 3 cameras and put it on the Osmo Pocket, whatever number in the future, that would be great. By the way,
I mean, to have of course, I mean, the Osmo, we talked about this before when you did your original review of the Osmo Pocket 3. There was a bigger Osmo before, which kind of wasn't a big success. And many years ago, they had this bigger Osmo that people kind of forgot about. And I guess they miniaturized it, and the question is, will it become bigger again? Because it will need to be a little bit bigger in order to house a second camera. But of course, it would be nice to have a 70mm. I mean, if for a second camera in an Osmo Pocket, I think 70 would be too long. I think you would need something like a 50.
Depends, if you're doing some
35.
sport. I actually shot another video review that is not out yet, more about putting the Osmo Pocket 3 into a more professional direction, like how it is to work on it on the field. And I was missing a long telephoto here. And of course, if it...
But it's almost like, like I just know it from the iPhone, where you have the 3 cameras now. And the weird thing is you have a 13, a 24, and now, what is it? 100 something, 170 or 160 millimeter lens. And it's crazy. For me, it's crazy. I don't understand why Apple replaced the third camera on all the Pro phones with the 5x magnification instead of the 3x, because I think very often, I mean, of course it's nice to have, but for
sport, when you're sitting away from a sport event, basketball or whatever.
But it's so funny to jump from 24 to 170, that there's something missing in the middle. And of course they have those crop modes, which, like you press again and you have the crop, but still like an actual. So I wonder, on a Pocket, I guess I would have the same issue. I don't know.
But we'll see, hopefully. But in any case, I think we should try to talk to DJI people and understand better like the naming and the features of those drones, in the sense of how they implement, like why they come up with a bit of confusing names, and if that's really a strategy to always implement the latest technology regardless to the drone positioning.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest question is simply, I mean, you're watching the YouTube here, so this is heavily compressed, of course, and actually I should switch to a better version even here. But my biggest question is simply the compression. Why do we suddenly, in DJI products in general, why is the compression heavier than it used to be? Which is really limiting the products in a way, because we don't want to go back, right? And that we've seen this several times in the past with DJI. For example, and I mentioned the Mavic 2 Pro before, but there was this whole thing with the tripod mode where that was suddenly gone, and the tripod mode originally was an extremely slow flying mode, and the Mavic 2 Pro was capable of doing this, which is something, especially if you follow people and you're very close to them, you need this, and also for safety reasons essentially, but also for the image. You want to fly slowly. Flying fast is not hard. I mean, flying fast is easy, and suddenly this was gone, and it was replaced with cinematic mode, which was not as slow. They always said it's replacing that, but for the longest time it was not possible to fly as slow as you used to be. And there was like whole campaigns that our friend Philip Bloom and others did, where like petitions asking for that, and he was successful with that. And now with the latest firmware updates, you finally can change the speed of cinematic mode again. So they took something they already had, took it away from us, and the same we saw with sharpening, post sharpening of images. Like suddenly, even the higher end Mavic drones were kind of had baked in sharpness, if you were not shooting ProRes, but anything else. And it was frustrating, right? And now it seems to be the same with the compressor. So, I mean, we know DJI is capable of doing like enhancing products, but for some reason they are, in some aspects, they're dumbing them down. And it's unnecessary, because I think you can at least have the option for professionals to change properties of the image and to like fly slowly and all those things. I mean, it's like that's what's a bit frustrating. But in general, to summarize, I mean, this drone I think fills a nice gap in DJI's lineup, because now we have have a camera that has a bigger sensor that is in between the Air 3 and the Mavic 3 Pro. I still think it's a huge jump in terms of price. I mean, because this is quite affordable. It's a $1,100 drone if you just buy the standard drone. And I think the Fly More combos are, depending on the controller you want, starting at $1,400 or $1,600. So it's actually almost the same price as the Air 3, or it is the same price actually, which is funny. And I just wonder, I hope they solve this compression issue, because then this is like, if you get started with drones and you want to create professional looking images, this is the go-to drone for me now. If you really want to go higher end, you have to go with a Mavic, but you're literally looking at spending 4 or 5 times as much if you want to do the ProRes, and that's a big jump. Yeah. So that's the question. Do you really need that? I think for most productions, the H.265 will be enough, if you like, unless you're really becoming professional drone pilot or whatever, and then you have to look at Inspire 3 anyway. So yeah.
Good.
So definitely also a recommendation for this drone, and again, I hope they will do the same with the compression as they have done with the Osmo Action 5, which leads me actually to the next subject. Because as I mentioned before, Gunther did a review of the Osmo Action 5 action camera a couple of weeks ago, which we published on the channel. We'll put the link in the show notes again, in case you missed it. And actually his conclusion was that great action camera,
but
all the bells and whistles, mostly, like performing better than GoPro. And however, the big but was that the compression got worse, like higher compression, as I just mentioned. And we reached out to them, we emailed them, and there was a little bit of a back and forth, and they didn't even realize that the quality dropped. That's as far as I could read from their replies. And they said they would consider to add this again in the next firmware update, and now they did. So about a week ago, they released a firmware update which literally gave us higher bitrates again, or the higher bitrate option, which is very nice. So it shows that they are listening. And for me, it's always a matter of what it means for overheating, if at all. Of course, this is a small camera, and don't know how you dispense the heat inside. Well, I can tell you, because we, like on this show that we both shot recently, or still shooting this multicam car show, we've been using 3 or 4 Action 4 cameras, the predecessor, which has a higher bitrate. And the cameras were just simply running for 2.5 hours at a time, and they never overheated.
But they had a different issue, which
They had a different issue, which I can mention now too, which is funny enough, and we'll also write to DJI about this. I mean, it's a very unusual use case, but they were running for like 2 hours sometimes and recording in the highest quality option. And if you would take out the card after that, like after pressing stop and putting in, like transferring on the computer, it's a corrupted file.
So it doesn't know how to make the closure after a certain time.
Yeah, but the weird thing is, we found out now a couple of days ago that if you connect the camera directly to the computer, it works. So we were able to salvage all the footage. And it must be something, a normal, the production company actually reached out to DJI support, and the reply was that the cameras are not intended to run that long, but this should be something that we should know, because I mean, we know that if there's, like that's one thing that GoPros do really well, they just record for a very long time, unless the battery runs out, because the battery, but if you power them externally, they can record for a very long time.
That's a funny answer.
Yeah.
Like the camera is not supposed to.
Yeah, well, it could be something, like a standard support.
But that should be written somewhere in the manual.
Yeah,
or
it isn't.
In the description.
Yeah.
Like don't.
It sounds
use it
like
more
an
than,
excuse. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
But yeah, but other than that, I mean, in terms of the footage was salvageable, and they never overheated. So that's a big one. And the thing is also with the Action 5 in general, I mean, those cameras are like $50 cheaper than the latest GoPros always, and seem to perform better. And also image-wise, now they're very, very convincing. I mean, they've come a very long way in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's usually with DJI, when they identify a place where they want to go, they try to do, if not on the first, maybe the second or third generation is already promising.
Yeah. Good. Let's move on to the next topic. We published a lab test, long-awaited lab test of the Panasonic LUMIX GH7.
Yeah. Just before we even dive into this specific one, guys, just that you know, it takes a lot of time to conduct those tests. We are working on multiple cameras. Some of them are, many of you have been asking for the Blackmagic Cine 12K,
Ursa 12K,
Ursa LF. It's in the making. Just that you know, we're not neglecting. It just simply takes time, and we find ourselves juggling with other things too. Gunther, our colleague, is on it, and hopefully that will be the next camera that we will publish the results. But yeah, and also when it comes to the GH7, it reminds me I still have to finish my review, which I did in the summer. I shot I think one of the nicest places in Japan. I was even thinking if to disclose the name of the place, because it's so beautiful, it's so peaceful.
You don't want to spoil it?
No, of course I will share it, but I'm just saying I never seen such an amazing place in Japan.
Just show us the review. Don't tease.
Okay.
Don't tease.
By the way, you know what I did here? I mean, it's all connected eventually. I tried to use to get a bit of a different aesthetic. I actually used a BLAZAR Anamorphic adapter on a Panasonic lens in order to give a 1.5.
Even more teasing, and I haven't seen any images, so stop it.
Okay, I'll stop.
So you can't see this review yet.
Okay, but so let's concentrate. Let's concentrate on what we can show.
So the GH7 lab test. Now, again, this car show that we just talked about, that we've been working on. So we have like a lot of different cameras in a car, filming people, and we tested a lot of cameras for this production. And the funny thing is, they're all LUMIX cameras now. So there's 6 cameras in this car now, and 4 of them are GH7s. And it's because finally this camera has an amazing autofocus. And I say finally because the GH6 still didn't have it. We tested it, we tried it, and it would simply lose focus very frequently. The GH7 did not, because now it has face detection autofocus, like the more recent full frame S-line cameras from Panasonic. So now finally also in the Micro Four Thirds. So and I'm just mentioning this because autofocus, of course, is something we do not test in a lab test, but it is really, really good, and it's spot on. And again, these are usually 2-hour shots sometimes, or 1.5 hour shots of just driving and having multiple ones of these cameras pointed at people running fully automatic. There's no way for us to do anything once they start driving, because it's a reality show. So essentially, they're all being shot by GH7 cameras, and they're all in focus. We've never had a focus issue with any of those cameras. With other issues with other cameras, but not with these. And the stabilization. The stabilization is amazing in these
Before
cameras.
we move to the stabilization, I think that's one of the frustrating things with like GH6 and other LUMIX cameras, that you see the focus point on the person and you think that it's actually working, but in reality it's not. But anyway, I think that's a thing of the past.
Yeah, I mean, when we started out testing for this show, we literally used all the LUMIX cameras we had lying around. And it was GH5, GH5S, GH6, GH7. And like you said, I mean, they all kind of at some point were just shifting focus for no reason. And there's literally just a close-up of a person.
They identify the face, but they are simply lose it
As
after.
if the software knows it's a face, but the autofocus just still decides, I'm just going to focus on the background now. So, and that's not happening with the GH7. So, and the stabilization of the sensor, that was actually the main reason why we went with the LUMIX line, because compared to any Sony and Canon cameras and also Fuji cameras, they just simply look the best. I mean, they have the best sensor stabilization, almost on par to the Olympus OM series cameras, which don't exist anymore in this form, because they had an amazing stabilization as well. But anyway,
so what did Gunther find? What did you find here?
The thing is, this is the first LUMIX camera, I think, or at least the first Micro Four Thirds camera that can shoot ProRes RAW 5.7K in 12-bit internally, which is amazing. I mean, like of course, relatively small sensor, very high resolution, ProRes RAW 12-bit internally without any external recording. So the expectation was quite high. Rolling shutter results, before we talk about dynamic range, is kind of good. I mean, it's not exceptional, but it's very solid. And of course, smaller sensor usually has a better result as well. So 13.2 milliseconds in rolling shutter when shooting 4K 25p on the GH7. And if you do a full 4x3 sensor scan, it's a little bit worse, 20.8 milliseconds. But still, I mean, this is a very good result. Dynamic range of the GH7 is solid, I would say. It's not exceptional, it's solid. It seems to be the case that as in the RAW, there is very little noise reduction happening.
That's right.
And when there is noise, it's very nice noise. It's kind of finely dispersed noise that can be easily cleaned up. And we see this especially for the most important test, which is the Latitude test.
That's right.
Because Gunther underexposed up to, I think, 8 stops. 8 stops under, so 4 stops under, we saw 5 stops under, and it's always pushed back. And I think it's,
I think the maximum was 6 stops under, no?
Yeah, so, 8 stops of underexposure brought back image still looks rather fine. That's what Gunther wrote. So that's kind of amazing. And this is a result that we haven't seen in a Micro Four Thirds camera before. So this is something that usually, like for the better full frame cameras. So that looks, for example, the Red Raptor X can handle 9 stops of exposure latitude, the Mini LF 10 stops, and the Alexa 35, which is still our benchmark here, up to 12 stops. Now, this all comes with a, they call it exposure push or something like that, or exposure
boost.
Yeah, exactly. Like dynamic range boost, which is by default, it's on. So that's why we decided to use this in the lab test. And the results are good. On paper, the dynamic range results before the Latitude test are 11.6 stops at signal to noise ratio of 1 and 9.85 stops at signal to noise ratio of 2. So that's not great, but it's okay, especially considering how the noise looks and that the noise can be easily cleaned up in post. So,
but that's just to conclude, this is the best Micro Four Thirds camera that Gunther ever tested when it comes to our lab test. And I think we both think that Panasonic really did a great job here.
Yeah, and it's funny that, we actually, speculated internally before this camera was released if there will ever be a new Micro Four Thirds camera, because of course they focused a lot of their efforts before on their full frame lineup, and it's nice to see that they still, they still acknowledge that there is actually a big market. And for our application in this car show, perfect. You can have people should not forget that you essentially can work with smaller lenses to have telephoto shots, right? I mean, it's kind of this Micro Four Thirds sensor size, I think, is very often a perfect compromise between, it's not full frame, but it's also not a tiny, sensor it means that you can have a relatively reasonably sized setup for a very, very flexible, you can still have a decent wide angle, but you will have a great telephoto.
And it's easy to separate the background also if you need. So all in all, especially if you're coming from ENG with 2/3 inch, usually those are the cameras that were in the market. That's a great balance between the sensor size, the image, and the size of the camera.
So let's move on to some lens news. SIRUI announced a new series of lenses called Aurora. What can you tell me about them?
Yeah, I have it right here. So that's the first one out of the 5 that will come out. It was announced, but it will come out soon. And it's quite interesting that SIRUI is now moving to the full frame autofocus. Spherical. We're talking about spherical. This is the first one that 85. As far as they are concerned, that's like a classic for portrait and so on. F1.4, like we see with many other manufacturers, everybody's now making much faster lenses than before, which is a bit funny because the cameras are much more sensitive than in the past. But still, it's nice to have those type of lenses. And I think again, what is really interesting here is the price, because that lens will be sold until the end of the year for $499. After that, early next year, it will be already $599. And what you can see here, it has a clutch to change between autofocus and manual focus, and it will come in a variety of mounts. The first one that we have here is E-mount. It seems like really E-mount is because Sony is selling quite well. This is the mount that most manufacturers will start with, and then they will tackle the other mounts too.
Well, I think they also don't have that much choice, because RF for full frame still seems to be limited to Canon themselves, and other than that, we only have L mount, right?
That's right, but. I mean, there are
Nikon mount, I guess.
Yes, the Z mount, of course, which is on the roadmap here. But that's also very lightweight. I mean, if you touch the lens, you'll be amazed.
But it feels high quality. It's like
the
metal.
lens, yes. I mean, I have to say that the aperture ring here in this is not 100%, but they are aware of this and they're working to enhance and fix it.
And you saw that the aperture is not actually changing when you turn it, like inside. I mean, on this one, it probably needs to be powered, but if you turn it, you don't see the aperture opening here.
Yeah,
I guess
think
that's
it's important.
Well, this is a pre-production version, and I'm sure it works fine on the camera. But
yeah, we will. Anyway, a review of this one have to come soon. Also, another review that we are working on. But all in all, yeah, another company, another lens company. The full frame autofocus lenses now is really becoming crowded. Also.
So this is, but that's a new series. So there will be a whole range of lenses.
There will be 5 of those, and the 85 is the first one.
And they have announced the other focal length?
No, they just announced that there will be 5 more.
Okay. So I guess 50, 35.
I don't want to guess. I mean, it's kind of easy to guess, but when you see others doing, I don't know, 23 or 24 millimeter or 25 millimeter, you then never know where exactly it's going to sit in the range. Yeah.
Cool. Good. Then there was other couple of lenses from Canon, which were just announced. So Canon is kind of, like filling their RF lineup of lenses, which is still growing. I mean, they still have a lot to catch up compared to other manufacturers. But now that we have more and more RF cameras, also on the cinema line, it's of course great that those are being added.
But those are hybrid lenses.
Yes.
Nino, what does hybrid means? I mean, I'm always...
Well, essentially, it means that you have an aperture ring, right? I mean, I wouldn't know what else they mean. They call them hybrid lenses, but so an aperture ring, and I guess also declickable. So it's the same as this Aurora, for example. But unfortunately, I mean, it means that it's both for photography and filmmaking. However, one thing we haven't seen, because first and foremost, all of those lenses, also like E-mount lenses from Sony, they are predominantly photo lenses still. I mean, they call them hybrid lenses, but if they were really hybrid, I would have hard stops at the beginning and the end and a focus gear, right?
The question is we have to look at the positive side, which means you have to look somewhere. Like if the start, you have to start somewhere. And before we didn't even have aperture rings on those lenses, and now at least they have aperture rings.
But now we know with those autofocus cinema lenses, like the BLAZAR APEX and the Sigma thing, that it's possible to actually do like proper gear rings with hard stops and autofocus. So we'll see where this leads. Maybe there will be like photo size, like photography lenses that are small and light like these, but still have hard stops, please.
But imagine if they already come with hard stops, they can't sell the in between.
Yeah, well.
So, but I do trust that we see that the Chinese companies are moving really, really fast with filling the gap of those missing lenses. So I can only imagine.
But back to those Canon RF lenses. So now we have a new RF 24mm f1.4 and RF 50mm 1.4. So they're both L lenses, which means full frame. On the Canon side, there's always those
RF, not L mount.
Not L mount. Sorry, yeah. This L specification means large or whatever. It's just for the full frame sensors, and you can also recognize them. Also on the EF series, it was always like this red ring means that they are not for APS-C. I mean, they work on APS-C, but they are covering a full frame sensor. The cool thing about those is those two are light. Which is
very light. It's something like 500 grams. Something.
Yeah, it's something you have to really point out here, because if there was one thing that was not so great about RF lenses so far, that a lot of them were quite heavy, and they're very high quality lenses. I mean, they're not the cheapest lenses out there, but the RF lenses that Canon has put out so far have been quite expensive, but very high quality. But that also made them heavy because they use a lot of glass. So those two are not as heavy. They are smaller and lighter, which is great to hear. And we also have a new RF 7200 f2.8 LIS USM Z lens. So it is a image stabilized lens, classical 7200 f2.8. It's not white.
No, it will come in two colors.
Oh,
I mean, you can see in the buy links, there's either white or black.
For some reason, nobody was able to explain it to me so far, why only the 7200 is always white. Is it because polar bears, like you don't...
No, I think it's also
the camera is always
a marketing thing. Even if it's only a marketing excuse, obviously you can see that all other manufacturers
everybody's doing
followed.
That. And it's like, but anyway, there's a black one. That's good. And has an image stabilization.
That will be sold for almost $3,000 US, yeah?
Which is also kind of normal. I mean, it's like, I think those 7200 f2.8 from any manufacturer, they usually start the cheapest ones at 2,000, and then I think the Sony also costs the same. So, but they really have a great image stabilizer usually. And last but not least, we also have a specialty lens from Canon, the RF-S 7.8mm f4 STM dual lens, which is really made for stereoscopic shooting. So it has two tiny lenses in front, which of course is aimed to mimic human vision, including peripheral vision, for those dual spatial shooting things that we talked about on the last podcast episode. In case you missed it, we had a nice episode with Christoph Tilley, who's been shooting a lot of content, video content for the Apple Vision Pro. And we talked a lot about the challenges and how hard it is actually to shoot for that right now, as there is no workflow in place. And one of the lenses, I mean, one of the setups he uses always is the EOS R, well, which one was it?
R7?
Was it the 7? Anyway,
I think that's the
8K one. Yeah, so, but with the other Canon lens, that is the dual fisheye lens, which is a larger lens. Now, honestly, I'm not an expert in this, but now there is a smaller version of a spatial lens from Canon, which I guess is good for smaller setups and just more flexible, I guess, because the other lens they also use on the red camera. And one of the challenges is he can't actually. So there's only this one lens and now this one. So that's why he cannot use something like the Ursa 12K, because it only comes with EF or PL and you can't put an RF lens on it because he needs resolution, right? Ideally you would have a 17K, which is coming, like the Ursa Cine 17K with that dual lens that Blackmagic kind of showed, or actually Apple showed during their keynote in summer. But yeah, so far the best resolution you can get is about 8K, which is like 4K per eye, and then it needs to be up-resed in order to be higher, like sharp enough for the Vision Pro. That's the challenge right now. Anyway, so those lenses are now out. It's the RF 7200 f2.8, the 5. Which one was it? 5.87. Sorry, S7.8 millimeter f4. And of course the 24 and which one was the other? 24 and 50 millimeter RF f1.4. So very fast lenses, light lenses, completing, kind of giving more options on the RF lineup, which is great. I mean, we see a lot of people picking up a C400. So I'm sure those people will be very happy about the new options.
Yeah, and shall we talk about another lens?
Which one?
The Nikon. Servo zoom.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. we So Nikon teased a new servo zoom, and actually I have to look for it.
Well, it's a 28 to 135 f4 Z mount lens from Nikon. And it's a development announcement. The thing is that this lens looks so much like a lens that we have seen before from Sony.
Yep.
And I mean, we really have to compare one by one. We will probably we will put also the picture of the Sony lens. So it really brings us to thinking if this is a exclusive kind of design by Nikon, or this is something somehow in cooperation with Sony.
Yeah, it's
just in order to enhance and move forward with Z-mount offerings for filmmakers. It's not one-on-one like per se. Yeah, I mean I have here on the laptop
I'll show Nikon. I'll show it here.
Okay. So let the audience decide. No, I mean, of course, some will say, "Hey, but what can you?"
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, we know. I mean, I've actually worked with the Sony lens over the last couple of days, just accidentally, and it's the same thing. I mean, it's 28 to 135.
This
f4,
is the suspicious thing here,
and it looks so similar. If you look at even the position of the rings, it's. I mean, just the positioning of some of the switches is different, but it's very similar. And the thing is with the Sony lens, I don't love this lens. I really was struggling yesterday with it when I was shooting because I don't think it's very sharp. It's even when I'm in focus, I always feel like I'm a little bit off. And of course, it's nice to have the servo zoom and, also be able to operate it from the handle of an FX9 or FX6, and also have the little servo on the lens itself. But it's f4 and 28 is not really wide enough.
That's the thing here for me. It's like not here, not there. I mean,
exactly.
On full frame, 28.
Yeah, it's not. You need at least 24.
I would even go. I mean, if it was up to me, I would literally move the blanket like to 20.
Yeah.
Or maybe
and
even
then go to
18.
70.
Exactly. That's more than enough. I mean, I don't really need 135 here.
And the image stabilizer is so on this lens. I have to say, it's like
you talk about the Sony.
Sony, yeah.
Yeah. Not that people think that we have.
No, we haven't touched the Nikon. It's just we're a little bit suspicious here because it looks like what? Why? Let me actually just.
But hey, let's see. I mean,
it's very.
It looks similar, but we know from other cases. Of course, you try to change some elements. I mean, we will be at Interbi this year, and maybe I'll have some chance to talk to Nikon people and get. Do you think they will ever tell us if they actually working with Sony together on this lens? I don't think so.
I don't think they are. I mean, they probably just saw what Sony did. It's interesting in terms of development. And this is E-mount, no? Or is it
Z-mount?
Oh, it's only Z. I'm sorry. That makes sense. It's a Nikon lens.
No, it's a Nikon Z-mount.
I haven't had breakfast today.
Yeah.
Why would Nikon make an E-mount? Okay,
exactly.
Sorry about that. Yeah, of course it's Z-mount. But I think it's funny in general that Nikon makes a lens like that because they haven't done. I'm not aware that they have done any video specific lenses.
That's the first one. That's after acquiring Red,
which hasn't done any. I mean, they have lenses in their lineup, but they were never made by Red.
Not true, but I'm just saying the appetite to cater the film making community is absolutely there. And I also, and again, it's not that we have any information. I'm always very concerned about this type of rumors, but if they're already investing in developing such a lens, I really wonder if this is only for the Z8, 9, 6 Mark 3, whatever, or this is already targeting future Red cameras, because right now the modern Red cameras are all with RF mount bayonet. And of course, there were a lot of speculations or questions. What will happen to the Red line of future cameras if they're going to move to Z mount? I think this is some type of indication without speculating too much. This is just my of course, you want to sell more lenses like this. And
it's funny though, because it's a little bit broadcasty, the lens. I mean, in general, to have a servo zoom, and the Red cameras are not broadcast cameras at all. So I don't know. But it's as you said. I think all we know is that it's a clear indication that Nikon is serious about the cinema or filmmaking market or video market in general. And And if you guys want to hear more details about this, just write in the comments, please. And really, I'll do my best, or we will do our best when we're in Japan next time. In 11, 12 days. At Interbi to make a short interview about this lens and find out more. Maybe they show a prototype. Yeah, pretty cool. All right. Last but not least, we'll just mention Insta360 also announced a new action camera, the Ace Pro 2 8K action camera. Now, we've never reviewed an Insta360 action camera, so all we know is that it looks almost the same as the predecessor, which was the Ace Pro 8K, which was announced last year. Now, the cool thing is, I think it's great that they are also moving in this action camera market, which is becoming a little bit crowded. I mean, GoPro is really getting a lot of competition from DJI and also from Insta360. And Insta360 have really made a name for themselves for 360 cameras. I think they've done a good job at marketing their products to a lot of creators that, shooting 360. You don't really hear anything about the GoPro Max anymore, that 360 camera from GoPro, which hasn't been updated in a long time. And but Insta360 is constantly pushing out new models in their 360 lineup. Now, weirdly, their name Insta360, now they make also non-360 cameras, which is
marketing-wise is confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing, but it's not a 360 camera. It's just a company name. But what I like about it, again, we haven't touched it, but it's nice to have this flip-up screen. That's really great. I think it's a much smarter approach than having this second screen that GoPro has, where you just have this tiny screen in front.
I'm waiting for the day that mobile phones are like this, by the way. When you
mean you want a flip phone again?
No, what I want, because the higher resolution is here, the cameras are here. So if I'm filming myself on a high resolution,
so you want a flip phone?
Something like this, maybe.
Okay, you want to go back to flip phones?
To something that shows me myself if I'm talking just to have it.
I'll give you my old Motorola Razr. I still have it somewhere.
Oh, you're so kind sometimes. Thank you, Nino.
No, but the idea is great, to have this monitor like this, and it's a large screen. The thing is, it's an 8K camera. I'm always a little bit skeptical with this tiny sensor.
And the bitrate,
and it's 8-bit.
8-bit.
Yeah, it's still 8-bit. Now, the innovation here, it seems to be, we've not reviewed it again. I've looked some of the reviews out there, and people are saying that it's the same sensor as before. And, like, I mean, a lot of people did. If you Google this, you will find a couple of videos of people doing side-by-sides of this with the Action 5, actually, and also the latest GoPro 13. And, I mean, you see the difference that it's 8-bit. I mean, unfortunately, you really need the 10-bit, and you can see the difference to the DJI, which is coming out as the best one in most of those reviews that I've seen. Now, they added some AI functions, some of which are quite smart. And it's a lot of software stuff that was added here, and I think the noise reduction is better, thanks to better processing. But essentially, the sensors are the same. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just nice to see some movement in this market. All of those cameras are in the same price range. The DJI is actually $350, and the Ace Pro from Insta360 and the GoPro are $400. Each, so all very similar.
Ace Pro 2, no?
Ace Pro 2, 8K, yeah. Anyway, but so that's out, and I think we should wrap it up here.
Yeah, I just want more word about Chinese companies who are making those cameras in general. I think it's amazing how they progress in time with marketing. It's quite amazing how the marketing material is much more solid, and when you see those, you think you're really buying the best camera in the world. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say with the GoPro, we had this for comparison where, I mean, GoPro they managed to market themselves. It always reminded me of Red Bull. You know, they really went after sport and all this. And GoPro is like, if people say GoPro, they mean action camera, right? That's really...
Maybe only action
that
camera.
Speaks for their marketing, right? That's kind of what you think about.
Yeah.
And even if now sometimes people mean the DJI camera, like you say, where's the GoPro on set? It's like they mean the action camera. However, I think their marketing, and I guess GoPro in general is a little bit in trouble after, like some failed attempts at drones, but also some internal stuff that, of course, wasn't great. And I think some of their development went into the wrong direction. But the thing is, as you said, I think with comparing the release of the Action 5, the DJI Osmo Action 5 with the with a GoPro Hero 13, and just looking at the press images was staggering. I mean, you could see the press images from GoPro were really from a test shoot that they did, and just how clean and how perfectly arranged, almost Apple style, everything looked that DJI delivered in terms of press images compared to GoPro. They have to really step up the game to remain relevant, and I'm a little bit worried here.
That's a different topic.
Yeah, but still, it's just like, it's sad because the image out of the GoPro is still amazing, and they do a great job at like, even if you point the camera against the sun and you have a face in the foreground, it's just the whole HDR. It looks really great, but it's like they've just really innovation-wise. It's like we need more.
Can you build a business model
around one product?
Yeah,
and
that's the thing here. It always looks the same, and yeah. Anyway, it's really a totally different.
Yeah.
Maybe we should dedicate one episode to companies and products, but how they, what they think. Okay.
Well, thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Nino.
Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for more episodes from CineD Focus Check, and also please give us a subscribe to Focus Check on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can get podcasts. Please leave us a good rating if you like what you saw, and send this to a friend. And we hear you next week.
Bye.
Bye.